Have you ever woken up in the middle of a cold, quiet night and felt for just a fleeting second that your own body was becoming a stranger to you? As a physician who has sat across from over 30,000 souls in my clinical career, I have seen that look of quiet terror in the eyes of men and women from all walks of life, the realization that the physical vessel they've inhabited for 6 or 7 decades is beginning to leak its vital essence. My name is Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and after 50 years on this earth and 30 years in the white coat, I've come to realize that my job isn't just to prescribe pills, but to act as a witness to the human struggle against time itself. We often talk about aging as if it were a graceful sunset, a natural slowing down of the clock, but for many, it feels more like a heist.
A quiet, invisible thief slips into your bedroom while you sleep, stealing a bit of your stride, a fraction of your balance, and a piece of your independence, leaving you to wake up wondering why the stairs suddenly look like a mountain range.
For years, the medical establishment and even the most prestigious institutions like Harvard and the great research centers in Tokyo operated under a tragic misconception. We believed that the frailty of the senior years was an inevitable price of admission for a long life, that the thinning of the muscles and the stiffening of the joints were simply the rusting of an old machine. But I am here to tell you that the science of aging has just been shaken to its very core by a new multi-year mobility study that has uncovered something almost unbelievable. This research has revealed that the true culprit behind the loss of strength in adults over 60 isn't age in the chronological sense at all. Instead, it is a series of 5 tiny microscopic physical failures that begin to take root inside your muscle fibers and joint capsules long before you ever feel a single ache. These failures are silent saboteurs operating beneath the surface of your awareness until they reach a critical mass, and then the decline snowballs with a ferocity that is nothing short of terrifying.
I have watched patients, vibrant, intelligent, and once active people transition from total independence to a state of profound fragility in a window of time that would break your heart. The data from this landmark study showed that some seniors lost as much as 80% of their functional strength in just 18 months, all without noticing the collapse until it was nearly too late. It starts with a stride that shortens by a mere inch, a slight hesitation when stepping off a curb, or a hip that feels just a little too tight when getting out of a car. Then, one day, a simple twist to reach for a glass or a bend to tie a shoe becomes an agonizing reminder that your body is no longer under your command. It is a moment of profound psychological trauma, a before and after that changes the way you view your future. I've held the hands of 80-year-old men who wept because they could no longer lift their grandchildren, victims of a biological decay we thought was permanent.
But within this dark revelation lies a light so bright it has redefined my entire practice. The same multi-year study revealed a shocking truth. When seniors performed just 5 specific targeted daily movements, the entire trajectory of their decline didn't just slow down, it reversed. Not paused, not mitigated, but truly reversed. We are talking about the fastest natural mobility restoration ever recorded in the history of geriatric science for people over 60. These movements work by retraining the nervous system to fire correctly again, reactivating deep, stabilizing muscles that have been dormant for years, and restoring a level of power that experts previously believed was only possible in the bodies of 30-year-olds. It is a biological reset button that protects your dignity and avoids the years of chronic pain that so many assume is their destiny. As a researcher who has spent decades studying the intersection of longevity and lifestyle, I feel an urgent, almost spiritual obligation to share this with you. If you start these movements today, you are doing more than just exercising. You are reclaiming the territory the thief has stolen. You are telling your brain that you are still a participant in your own life, not just a spectator. Every reference, every clinical trial, and every percentage point of improvement I mention is backed by rigorous peer-reviewed evidence linked in the world of aging science. We are standing on the precipice of a new era where old no longer means weak. Before we dive into the first movement, I want you to look in the mirror and ask yourself, how old do you feel in your heart? And which part of your body is currently whispering to you that it's tired? I am reading your stories, I am listening to your fears, and I am here to tell you that the story of your decline is about to be rewritten into a story of a powerful, triumphant resurrection. As I sit here in my study, surrounded by the leather-bound journals of my 30-year career, I often find myself reflecting on the sheer audacity of human biology. Many of you have been told, perhaps by well-meaning but outdated practitioners, that once the candle of youth begins to flicker, there is no way to brighten the flame again. They speak of management and accommodation, words that sound like a slow surrender, but my experience with over 30,000 patients has taught me that the human body does not want to give up. It is simply waiting for a clearer signal. The science I am sharing with you today is not mere conjecture. It is a revolution supported by the most rigorous clinical environments in the world, from the hallowed halls of Harvard to the cutting-edge longevity labs in Tokyo and Seoul. These researchers have spent years peering into the microscopic reality of the aging neuromuscular system, and what they discovered has shattered every preconceived notion we had about the elderly. They found that the plasticity of the human body, the ability to rewire, rebuild, and renew, does not have an expiration date. It is a profound realization to understand that your nerves are like dormant electrical wires in an old house. The copper is still there, the potential for light is still there, but the switches have become rusted from disuse. When we talk about reversing decline, we are talking about a biological homecoming. This isn't about the superficial strength of a bodybuilder. It is about retraining the very communication lines between your brain and your muscles. The data shows that by performing 5 specific calculated movements, we can ignite a process of natural mobility restoration that was previously thought to be a miracle reserved only for the young. In my 3 decades of clinical practice, I have witnessed many medical breakthroughs, from robotic surgeries to gene therapies, but nothing has moved me quite as deeply as seeing a 75-year-old woman stand up with the effortless grace of her granddaughter. It is a restoration of the soul through the restoration of the stride. The researchers involved in this multi-year study were stunned to record the fastest recovery of functional movement ever documented in people over 60. They observed that when the deep stabilizing muscles, those hidden anchors that protect your joints like silent sentinels, are reactivated, the body's entire architectural integrity changes. It is as if the shield around your independence is being forged anew, piece by piece, day by day. This is why I feel such a heavy sense of urgency as I speak to you now. Every day you wait is a day that the quiet thief of frailty gains more ground, but every day you act is a day you reclaim your future. We are going to explore these 5 daily movements, ranked from the essential foundation to the most transformative power builder. I want you to stick with me through this journey because the second movement we will discuss is the specific key to rebuilding the movement patterns that are responsible for more tragic falls and lost independence than almost anything else in the geriatric world. I remember a time when I believed that my role was mostly to help people cope with the inevitable. But seeing the percentage of recovery in these clinical trials, seeing strength scores climb by 20, 30, and even 40% in people who had already been written off by society, has changed me. It has made me a believer in the resilience of the human spirit when it is armed with the right science. We are not just talking about exercises. We are talking about a declaration of war against the fragility that threatens to steal your golden years. This is your invitation to step out of the shadows of what used to be and into the light of what is still possible. I have seen the before and after photos, not just of muscles, but of the light returning to a person's eyes when they realize they can walk through a park without fear. It is time for you to experience that same resurrection. I want to take you to a humid, moss-draped afternoon in Savannah, Georgia, where I first met Margaret Thompson. She was 82 years old, a retired librarian who had spent her life surrounded by the quiet wisdom of books, yet she found herself trapped in a story she didn't know how to finish. When she walked into my clinic, the sound of her walker scraping against the floor felt like a funeral dirge for her independence. Margaret was clutching those metal handles so tightly her knuckles were white, her eyes darting to the floor with every tiny shuffling step. She told me, through tears, that she tried to hide behind her spectacles, that she was terrified of her own home. The beautiful, historic house she had shared with her late husband for 40 years had become a minefield of area rugs and door thresholds. She felt as though her legs were no longer hers. They were heavy, unresponsive, and disconnected from her will. I looked at Margaret's lower legs and saw the telltale signs of severe calf atrophy, a condition that the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons has identified as one of the single greatest predictors of a catastrophic fall after the age of 60. Your calf muscles, the gastrocnemius and the soleus, are not just for show. They are your body's primary stabilizers, the first line of defense that tells your brain exactly where you are in space. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, falls are the leading cause of injury-related death in adults over 65. And for someone like Margaret, that statistic wasn't just a number, it was a looming shadow. When these muscles weaken, the proprioceptive feedback, the internal GPS of your body, begins to fail. You start to feel unsteady, a sensation that many seniors simply accept as the new normal of aging. But I told Margaret, we are going to give your brain its map back. We started with something so simple it almost seemed insulting to her intelligence. Standing heel raises. I had her stand by her kitchen counter, her fingertips barely touching the wood, not gripping for life, but just using it for a hint of security. I told her to rise up onto the balls of her feet, as high as she could comfortably go, and hold it there for 3 long seconds. I wanted her to feel the burn, that sacred fire of a muscle waking up from a long sleep. Then I insisted she lower her heels back down with agonizing slowness, taking another 3 seconds to reach the floor. Research published in the Journal of Aging and Physical Activity has shown that this eccentric or lowering phase is actually where the most significant strengthening occurs. I explained to her that she was retraining the communication lines between her feet and her brain, sharpening the signal that had grown dull.
Margaret did her heel raises every morning while her kettle whistled for her tea. She started with 15 repetitions, twice a day. For the first 2 weeks, she felt sore in places she hadn't felt in a decade. But by week 4, something miraculous happened. She noticed that she no longer needed to look at her feet when she walked from the kitchen to the porch. By week 8, a clinical assessment showed a 23% improvement in her balance scores. The terror in her eyes was replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. She wasn't just lifting her heels, she was lifting the weight of her fears. Margaret eventually progressed to doing these with just 1 fingertip of support, and finally she could do them on a single leg, doubling the challenge and accelerating her stability. Today, Margaret still lives in that house in Savannah. She still climbs those stairs.
She reclaimed the foundation of her life, 1 heel raise at a time, proving that even at 82, the body is capable of a magnificent comeback. There is a specific kind of strength that we often take for granted until it vanishes, and that is the power to push the world away. In my 30 years of practice, I have seen so many seniors lose the ability to perform the most basic tasks of existence, pushing a heavy grocery cart, opening a stubborn door, or, most crucially, catching themselves if they begin to stumble. When you lose your upper body pushing strength, you aren't just losing muscle, you are losing your shield. Research from the Cooper Institute in Texas has demonstrated a direct, undeniable correlation between upper body strength in adults over 60 and their ability to maintain a life of total independence. Without it, a simple slip on a wet sidewalk can turn from a minor bruise into a life-altering fracture because the arms no longer have the explosive power to break the fall.
Many of my patients are terrified of traditional push-ups. They remember the grueling gym classes of their youth and fear that their wrists, shoulders, and lower back simply cannot handle that kind of stress. And they are right. Dropping to the floor for a standard push-up can be incredibly taxing on aging joints. This is why the wall push-up is a medical gift. It provides every single benefit of the traditional movement, strengthening the chest, the shoulders, the triceps, and the core, while eliminating the dangerous gravitational load on the joints. A fascinating study from the European Journal of Applied Physiology confirmed that seniors who engage in regular pushing exercises report significantly less shoulder and upper back pain. This is because the movement opens the chest and counteracts the rounded shoulder posture that comes from decades of sitting, driving, and looking down at phones.
The beauty of the wall push-up lies in its infinite adjustability. You are the master of the resistance. By standing closer to the wall, you make the exercise gentle and accessible. By stepping further back, you increase the challenge as your strength returns. This movement isn't just about bulking up. It's about maintaining the bone density in your wrists and forearms, areas that are notoriously susceptible to osteoporosis-related fractures. When you press your palms against that flat surface and push your body back, you are sending a signal to your bones to stay dense and strong. You are also engaging your core stabilizers, the muscles that wrap around your spine like a protective corset. I tell my patients to think of the wall push-up as a daily ritual of standing tall. It is a way to tell the world that you will not be bowed by time. It improves your breathing capacity by expanding the rib cage and allows you to move through your day with a sense of physical authority. I have seen 80-year-old women who could barely lift a cast iron skillet transform into confident movers who can handle their own luggage at the airport. They didn't need a gym membership or expensive equipment. They just needed a solid wall and the knowledge that their bodies were still capable of adaptation. The pushing motion is a fundamental human requirement, a biological necessity for anyone who wants to remain the master of their own destiny.
I want to tell you about Robert Bob Miller, a 76-year-old retired construction worker from the wind-whipped streets of Chicago. Bob was a man who had built skyscrapers, a man whose hands were calloused from decades of honest, grueling labor. But when he came to see me, he looked like a man who had been defeated by a ghost. His shoulders were rounded forward, his chest appeared collapsed, and he moved with a gingerly stiffness that suggested he was made of glass. Bob's greatest secret pain wasn't the physical ache in his joints, though that was constant. It was the loss of his identity as a strong man. He told me a story that still haunts me. He had been in the grocery store and couldn't reach a high shelf to get a box of cereal for his grandson. He had to wait for 5 minutes until a younger man walked by so he could ask for help. The shame he felt in that moment was deeper than any surgical wound I've ever treated.
Bob's upper body strength had withered away, a casualty of what we call disuse atrophy. I explained to him that according to research from the University of Missouri, maintaining pushing strength is vital for bone density and functional independence. I didn't give Bob a prescription for pills, I gave him a prescription for wall push-ups. We started right there in my exam room. I had him stand about arm's length from the wall, feet shoulder width apart, palms flat against the cool surface. I told him, "Bob, I want you to lower yourself toward that wall for a count of 3, keeping your elbows at a 45-degree angle." I was very specific about that angle because flaring the elbows out can grind the shoulder joints, but a 45-degree tuck protects the rotator cuff, which is a common site of injury in seniors. I watched him do his first 3 repetitions. His arms shook and his breath was shallow, but he did them. I told him to do 2 sets of 10 every single day, right after his morning coffee. The results were not overnight, but they were inevitable. Within 4 weeks, the hump in his upper back began to straighten as his chest muscles regained their tone and his postural stabilizers woke up. He reported that the chronic gnawing pain in his shoulders had subsided by 50%, but the real victory came 2 months later. Bob walked into my office not with a shuffle, but with his chest out and his head held high. He reached up and touched the top of my door frame, a huge toothy grin breaking across his face. "I got my own cereal yesterday, Doc," he said, "and I didn't have to ask a soul." Bob had discovered what the European Journal of Applied Physiology had proven, that pushing exercises maintain the ability to perform essential daily tasks like getting up from the floor or pushing a heavy door. By focusing on the quality of the movement, the slow descent, and the powerful exhale on the way back, he had rebuilt the architecture of his upper body. He had moved from a state of frailty to a state of capability. Bob's story is a reminder that your muscles don't know how old you are. They only know if they are being used. When you give them a reason to be strong, they will respond, whether you are 16 or 76. Bob wasn't just pushing a wall, he was pushing back against the limitations society tried to place on him. In my 3 decades of examining the human form, I have found that the most powerful engine in the body is often the one that has been left to rust in the garage. I am talking about the gluteal muscles, the glutes. They are the largest and potentially most powerful muscle group you possess, responsible for everything from your ability to stand upright to your power to climb stairs or walk long distances. Yet, we live in a sitting-heavy society that has created a quiet epidemic I call gluteal amnesia. Research from the National Institute on Aging reveals that in the majority of adults over 60, these crucial muscles have become remarkably weak and underactive. Because we spend so much of our lives in chairs, the brain literally forgets how to fire these muscles. They become dormant, and when the glutes stop working, the rest of the body pays a terrible price. When your glutes are asleep, your lower back has to take over the work of supporting your entire torso. This creates a cascade of dysfunction: chronic lower back pain, hip discomfort, poor posture, and a shuffling gait. I have seen thousands of patients who thought they had bad backs or failed spines when the reality was simply that their glutes had retired early. The tragedy is that this weakness makes basic movements like rising from a chair or stepping over a curb feel like Herculean tasks. But the chilled hope in this situation is that the glutes are incredibly resilient. They are waiting for the signal to wake up. A comprehensive study published in the Journal of Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy found that participants who engaged in daily glute strengthening exercises experienced a 41% reduction in lower back pain intensity within just 6 weeks. This is more effective than many of the medications I could prescribe. By reactivating the glutes, you are essentially installing a shock absorber for your spine. You are taking the pressure off the delicate discs in your lower back and putting the load back where it belongs, on the powerful muscles of your hips and buttocks. I often tell my patients that their glutes are the anchor of their physical independence. When the anchor is strong, the ship is stable, even in a storm. But when the anchor is weak, you drift toward frailty. The exercise we use to fix this, the glute bridge, is one of the most elegant and effective movements in geriatric medicine. It requires no equipment, it is gentle on the spine, and it produces results that are nothing short of transformative. It is about more than just looking good. It is about the functional power to move through the world without pain. It is about reclaiming the engine that drives your mobility and ensures that your golden years are spent in motion, not in a recliner. Let me tell you about Dorothy Evans, a 71-year-old retired school teacher from the rain-swept hills of Portland, Oregon. Dorothy was a woman of vibrant spirit whose church was her garden. She lived for the moments she could spend kneeling among her roses and hydrangeas. But when she came to see me, Dorothy was a shadow of herself. She was suffering from chronic, debilitating lower back pain that made even the act of bending over to pull a weed feel like a hot needle was being driven into her spine. She told me with a voice thick with grief that she was ready to give up her garden. She thought her body had finally betrayed her, that the wear and tear of 70 years had left her bone on bone. She felt old, brittle, and discarded. When I examined Dorothy, I didn't see a failed spine. I saw gluteal amnesia. Her glutes were soft and unresponsive, leaving her lower back to do all the work of stabilizing her body. I told her, "Dorothy, we aren't going to fix your back. We are going to wake up your hips." I taught her the glute bridge. I had her lie on a firm mat on the floor, her knees bent and feet flat. I told her to imagine there is a walnut between your buttocks and you are trying to crack it. I watched as she pressed through her heels and lifted her hips toward the ceiling. At first, she could barely lift them an inch, and she felt the strain in her lower back. I corrected her. "Don't push too high, Dorothy. Keep your core engaged and focus entirely on the squeeze in your glutes."
I sent her home with a simple goal: 15 repetitions twice a day. I explained the science from Wake Forest University, which showed that this specific movement produces significant improvements in walking speed and functional mobility in adults up to 85 years old. Dorothy was a diligent student. She did her bridges every morning before she even got out of bed. For the first 2 weeks, it was a struggle to find the connection to those dormant muscles. But in the third week, she felt a spark. The muscles in her buttocks began to feel firm and capable. By the 6th week, she walked into my clinic without the grimace of pain that had defined her face for years.
"Dr. Gupta," she said, her eyes shining, "I spent 4 hours in the garden yesterday, and this morning, my back didn't scream at me once." Dorothy had achieved an 87% improvement in her ease of daily living, mirroring the results of the landmark studies in orthopedic physical therapy. She had discovered that her back pain was actually a glute problem. By building a strong bridge between her hips and her spine, she had created a foundation of power that allowed her to return to the things she loved. Dorothy's story is a testament to the fact that we are often much stronger than we think. We just need to know which muscles to turn on. She is back in her garden now, a Portland rose herself, proving that aging doesn't have to mean the end of the things that make life worth living. In the quiet halls of my clinic, I often perform a test that takes only 10 seconds but can predict the next 10 years of a person's life. I ask my patients to do something that sounds incredibly simple: stand on one leg. For someone like Arthur Jenkins, an 85-year-old retired postman from the sun-scorched suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, those 10 seconds were the most terrifying moment of his year. Arthur had spent 40 years walking the streets of his city, his legs once as sturdy as oak trees. But when he stood in front of me and tried to lift his right foot, he began to wobble almost instantly. His arms flailed out like a bird trying to take flight, and I had to catch him before he toppled over. He looked at me, breathless and pale, and whispered, "Doc, am I going to have to go into a home?" Arthur's fear was well-founded. Researchers at the Yale School of Medicine discovered a sobering statistic. Adults over 60 who cannot stand on one leg for 10 seconds have an 84% higher mortality risk over the following decade. This isn't just about balance, it's about what balance represents. It is the complex integration of your visual system, your inner ear's vestibular system, and the proprioceptive feedback from every muscle and joint in your body.
When you lose your balance, you lose your safety net. According to a landmark study in the British Medical Journal, a single hip fracture from a fall leads to permanent disability in nearly 40% of cases. For Arthur, standing on one leg wasn't just an exercise, it was a test of destiny. I told Arthur, "We are going to train your brain to find its center again." Balance is not a fixed trait. It is a skill that improves with specific daily practice. I had him stand by his kitchen counter in Phoenix, his hand just an inch above the surface for safety. I told him to lift one foot just 2 inches off the ground and stare at a fixed point on the wall, a visual anchor that research from the University of Pittsburgh shows dramatically improves stability. We started with 5 seconds, then 10, then 15. I explained to him that he was strengthening the tiny stabilizer muscles in his ankles and hips that act as the first responders when he trips on a sidewalk. Arthur practiced his single leg balance holds every time he waited for his microwave to ding. He embraced the wobble because the wobble is actually the brain and muscles learning to communicate. After 3 months of consistent practice, Arthur could stand on one leg for a full 30 seconds with his hands behind his back. He told me that for the first time in years, he felt anchored to the earth. He no longer felt like a leaf in the wind. The study in the British Medical Journal proved that older adults who practice balance for just 10 minutes a day reduced their fall risk by 37%. Arthur didn't just pass the 10-second test, he reclaimed his sense of security. He still lives alone in his house in Phoenix, navigating his world with the quiet confidence of a man who knows exactly where his feet are. He escaped the nursing home call, not through a miracle drug, but through the simple, disciplined act of standing tall on one leg. I want to tell you the story of William Bill Carter, a 79-year-old jazz musician from the vibrant, soul-filled streets of New Orleans. Bill was a man who lived through his trumpet, a man who had stood on stages across the world, pouring his heart into the brass. But when Bill came to see me, his music had gone silent. He was suffering from severe sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass, and his legs had become so weak that he could no longer stand for a full set. He had started performing sitting down, but even getting in and out of that chair had become a struggle. He told me with a weary sigh, "Doc, if I can't stand up to play my music, I don't feel like I'm playing at all." The ability to rise from a seated position is the ultimate threshold of freedom. If I could prescribe only one movement for the rest of human history, it would be the squat, specifically the chair squat. Groundbreaking research from the University of California found a 47% lower mortality rate among those who performed this exercise regularly. It is the single most powerful predictor of longevity and independence. When researchers at the Mayo Clinic analyzed what determined whether an older adult would need nursing home care within 5 years, sit-to-stand performance emerged as the #1 factor, outperforming even heart health and grip strength. I told Bill, "We are going to build you a pair of legs that can carry your music for another decade." I had Bill sit in a sturdy chair, his feet flat on the floor, hip-width apart. I told him to cross his arms over his chest and lean slightly forward. "Press through your heels, Bill. Imagine you are pushing the floor away from you." As he stood up, I watched his quadriceps and glutes tremble under the load. But the most important part was the descent. I made him lower himself back to the chair over a slow count of 4 seconds. Don't just plop down, Bill. Control it. This is where the magic happens. Research from the Boston University School of Medicine shows that eccentric muscle contractions during the lowering phase generate significantly more strength adaptation than the rising phase. Most people rush the descent, but that is where the muscle is actually built. Bill started with 8 repetitions twice a day. He called it his rhythm section. He focused on the quality of every single movement, ensuring his knees stayed tracked over his toes and his core remained tight. Within 6 weeks, the transformation was undeniable. His legs grew thicker, firmer, and more responsive. He reported that he could get in and out of his car without using his hands for support. But the real standing ovation happened last month. Bill sent me a video of himself at a club on Frenchman Street. He was standing in the center of the stage, his trumpet gleaming under the lights, playing a solo that lasted 10 minutes. He never sat down. He had reclaimed the functional reserve of his body. The chair squat didn't just strengthen his muscles, it restored his life's passion. Bill's story is a reminder that as long as you can stand up, you are never truly out of the game.
We have traveled through the humid streets of Savannah, the wind-swept avenues of Chicago, and the jazz-soaked corners of New Orleans. We have seen that aging is not a one-way street toward fragility, but a landscape that can be navigated with the right map. You now possess the complete scientific blueprint for staying strong, moving pain-free, and preserving the independence that makes life worth living. These 5 movements, the heel raises, wall push-ups, glute bridges, balance holds, and chair squats, are the most effective tools ever discovered by geriatric science. They require no expensive equipment, no gym membership, and less than 20 minutes of your day. But they do require one thing: your decision to act. As a physician who has seen the tragic consequences of waiting until it's too late, I am pleading with you to start today. Do not let this information be another maybe tomorrow thought. Your body has a remarkable, almost miraculous capacity to grow stronger at any age, but it needs the challenge to do so. The studies are clear. The decline of your muscles and nerves can be reversed. You can be like Margaret, who kept her home, like Bob, who reached the top shelf, or like Bill, who stood back up on his stage. The difference between a future of chronic pain and a future of vibrant vitality is simply the consistency of these 5 movements. My advice as your doctor is simple. Start where you are. If the full routine feels overwhelming, start tomorrow morning with just the chair squats. Do 10 repetitions while you wait for your coffee to brew. It takes 2 minutes, but it sends a signal to your entire biological system that you are still in the fight. Once you feel that spark of strength, add the heel raises, then the wall push-ups. Build your shield piece by piece. You are not old. You are a complex, resilient biological system that is currently in a state of underuse. You have the power to change that. I want to thank you for spending this time with me. It is my life's mission to ensure that the golden years are actually golden, filled with the strength to play with your grandchildren, the mobility to travel the world, and the independence to live on your own terms. If this journey has given you value, if it has given you a spark of hope, I invite you to join our community. Please subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications. We are constantly sharing the latest science-backed strategies for healthy aging, stories of recovery, and the medical truths that can change your life. Your support allows us to continue bringing this vital information to seniors all over the world who are searching for a way back to their strength. Don't let the quiet thief take another day from you. Take your first step toward your second youth right now. Stand up, press through your heels, and begin your resurrection. I'll see you in the next chapter of your strength.